Hello, guys, and thank you for another. We got a little small episode, Sunday afternoon episode with you guys. Once again, I'm Wes Pruden. Jonathan Sturban's down there on the bottom. At least he is on my screen. We have a special guest today, Mr. Logan Rebstock. Logan, how are you doing today, sir?
Pretty good, man. Pretty good.
John?
Okay, and Logan, can you just talk about a little bit of your high school background in general? I know, and talk about what the reason that we're getting you on as well. Talking about your high school, coaching career, and then about the college kids that are playing. We have our show called College Football Pick'em, but we're also asking you to talk about the college kids that you have coached from Germantown, Blytheville, and now Haywood that are playing college football right now.
Yeah, so I started as a wide receivers coach at Blytheville for then who was the offensive coordinator, Chris Smith. And then now he got that head coaching job at Germantown, and I came over with him, and I started with receivers. And then he looked at me and said, "Hey, I really think you should become the defensive coordinator. I'll trust you with it. I'm going to give you free reign." And so we kind of had a rough first year, and he stuck with me. And then 2017, we went 11-1. Defense was pretty good. Went 2018, we go 12-1, and we beat Whitehaven at Whitehaven in both of those years for the region title. And so we were able to kind of get some kids who I think most people in the city would have looked at and kind of been like, well, they're good, but are they as good as some of these other programs? And so we were able to kind of elevate some of those guys. And what comes with that, obviously, is, the better stats they have, the faster they become, all of that kind of stuff, the more likely they are to play at the next level. So, I mean, we've had guys like Jalen Williams that's in Indiana starting right now at corner. We had Cam Baker who went to Memphis. I think he recently transferred out. We've got Darion Williamson and Marquiston Douglas. They're both at Florida State right now. We've got a couple kids. I've got Jalen Lewis, who's just a junior, and Cam Douglas, who's just a junior, and they've got Power 5 offers from just about everybody. But they weren't guys that people would have initially kind of pegged as those guys. We feel like we've kind of helped groom them a little bit with what we do in strength and conditioning. And, Coach Smith's a heck of a head coach. I mean, he's been one of my best friends since I was a kid, and he knows how to put guys in positions to succeed. And then, allowing me to do what I need to do to help on the other side of the ball, it just opens more opportunities for those guys. So we feel like we've figured out a way to get those guys there, and to not only get them there, but to have them ready when they go.
Let me ask you this, Logan. Just coming from Blytheville, and I'm a little bit familiar with their school and their football program, and then coming to Germantown, and then now being where you are. Can you talk a little bit about just what it's like to deal with the different groups of kids that you're going to coach in those different areas of really the country?
So what you find is that every program has its benefits, and every program has its challenges. And so you can't coach the kids the same everywhere you go. When you first walk into a place, you find out very quickly who those kids are. And the thing that was interesting about Germantown and Blytheville was, at the time, like, I grew up there. I played at Blytheville. It had never been traditionally very, very good. I mean, it had good independent seasons here or there.
Right.
And in my senior year, we were part of one of those. And so we kind of knew what it would take, and it was never a talent issue. It was just more of a, can we connect all the dots and get all the pieces together? So the one year we were there, they had gone, I think, like 0-10 the year before, hadn't scored many points. And we wound up going like 6-4, playing Pulaski Academy, which is one of the top programs in the country, really close for almost, 4 quarters. And so we felt like, okay, we're starting to figure things out. We're really young, at that point. Coach Smith and I both, I think, are like 25, 26 years old. Wow. And then Germantown comes open. Well, it's one of the most storied programs in Tennessee, especially at the time. And so, they're looking to kind of modernize and change things. And so we come in and, we took it on the chin a little bit early on. But what we realized is that there's not an immediate fix for a lot of these places. And a lot of these, I think, coaches that want to go in and think it's just going to change on a dime. I mean, until you meet some of these kids and know who some of these kids are and really evaluate the talent, get in the weight room and have a chance with them, it's very hard to do. Now, there's some people who are excellent at doing that. For us, we feel like it's more about cooking. How much time can we really spend with those guys? And then, we go to Haywood, and Haywood was coming off a state title appearance in 2018. but then graduates like 33 seniors. So you don't know there's talent there because there's returning players. Like I told you, Marquiston and Darion, for instance. I mean, Marquiston was 6'6", 240, but had never played a snap of football. We got him off the basketball court and then come in signs, signs and is playing for Florida State. Darion was like an all-state linebacker, and we let him play a little linebacker, but, Coach Smith looks at him and he's like 6'3", 200 pounds, 4.38 guy, and puts him out there at receiver, and now he's catching balls for Norvell down at Florida State. And those guys had multiple offers. I mean, everybody from all over the country was coming in to look at him. Same thing with Jalen Williams. I think, he moves in from Texas out of nowhere, just happens to fall into our lap. And basically, I think to this day, still got robbed for not being Mr. Football that year in 2018. I mean, he was doing everything. And then you see what he's doing in college now. I mean, it's insane. But, I mean, he had like 35 offers before he left. I mean, when you get people like Saban coming in to check you out and talk to you, and Gary Patterson and, all of these guys. And I know there's other programs around the city that have that. But for us, they weren't guys that people immediately would have recognized and said, that's the one, Maybe Darion when we got to Haywood, but some of these other guys, I mean, it's a lot of it's built, a lot of it's built. And there's been other players. I mean, like Cam Baker, it took him to the last game of his senior year to get offered by Memphis. And that kid was at least G5 the whole time, and nobody would take a chance on him until kind of that point. So we just feel like if you can get into the lives of those kids, really find out what you're doing and what you're dealing with, and see where the benefits are, and then go ahead and start the process of molding your culture around some of those cons to turn those into positives, then a lot more positive things will happen.
Logan, can you compare? A lot of people are not familiar with the Tennessee, high school football that much around the country. Mm-hmm. Can you compare your Germantown 6A to Haywood's 4A a little bit? I know the enrollment's different and everything like that, and your numbers are different.
It's what's fascinating is that just sheer, like, let's say God-given talent. There's actually probably more natural talent at Haywood than there was at Germantown at the time we got there. Now, by the time we left, we had developed some of that talent to where, it was moving in all cylinders. It was really a program, we felt like at that point. And so the biggest difference is just going to be the fact that if there's a 6A school, you're going to have 100 to 160 kids. And if you lose a kid, the guy behind him is probably not that much different. At Haywood, we've got 30 guys that can go get it. But if one of those 30 guys goes down and he's in a set position, like, you're in trouble. I mean, our starting running back last year was projected to be a major Division I running back, tears his ACL. So a sophomore has to step in, has a great year, but he wasn't quite the same size, body-wise. We're having to change the scheme around to fix that kid. Well, then the very next week, Darion goes down, tearing his ACL in the very next game. And so we lose this major P5 talent, and a kid who had come off the baseball team, had never played football before, is now starting on a Friday night. At Germantown, that didn't happen for the most part. If somebody went down, 9 times out of 10, we had somebody that was within the same kind of pool to be able to replace that. One exception being a kid named Kevion Ware, who to this day was 5'7", and gave Kevion Mullins, who's at South Carolina, all he wanted. And that kid will forever be a hero to me because he stepped in for another D1 kid that we had that tore his ACL and fought like heck. So that kid always, kind of stood out. But that's what you're dealing with in the disparity between size, is just overall pool, not so much natural talent.
Do you have a favorite memory from your Blytheville coaching days and your Germantown coaching days?
Oh,
and
yeah.
Your Haywood coaching days?
So
all three, basically, that's what I'm asking.
So Haywood is probably going to be we're playing South Gibson, and they still give us fits. I don't know. It's kind of like, there's that one coach that always just seems to be your arch nemesis, and Coach Stidham does an excellent job over there. And for some reason, for me, he's that guy. And so we're in a battle. We're going down to score to have to take the lead, and there's no time left. There's like 8 seconds left. And Coach Smith looks at me and he's like, I'm going for 2. And I'm like, okay, let's take this chance. It's 49-48. and he throws a pop pass off power right there at the very end and to Marquiston, and they never really see it coming, and he just dunks on this kid. And you know, that was to win, to pull that out and keep us on the track that we were going on, especially after losing a couple of guys to injury and stuff like that, was big. You know, Germantown, that first time of beating Whitehaven, getting over the hill. You know, the year before in 2016, we went 3-8, but what people didn't really look at some of the scores. And we're going toe to toe with Cordova, who goes 13-1 that year, or 13-2, something like that. And then Whitehaven wins that state title. But we had Whitehaven beat that year, and if we don't muff a punt and throw a pick going into score, we win in 2016.
Right.
And we weren't supposed to be very good. So in 2017, having to go back, and you're in that environment with those kind of kids that are athletic as all heck, and Coach Salisbury does a great job. I mean, it was pouring down rain. It was cold. We told our kids, hey, you can't wear sleeves. You've got to go out there barehanded, no gloves, no sleeves. People thought we were insane. And then winding up winning that field, that was incredible. And it was, I mean, I remember I like buckled, like I fell to my knees, because I felt like at that point within the city, we had kind of arrived. We had made it to that point. When you can, in 2017, every team in our region was in the top 10 in 6A. And some of them were ranked, including ourselves, in the – for that to happen, that moment was huge. And that set the tone for 2018 when a kid like Jalen Williams leaves and everybody's looking at us and like, well, you're not going to have anybody to replace him. And then you get the Ethan Paynes of the world, the Cam Bakers of the world. They start showing up and continue that standard. And so it worked itself out for us, you know, in that respect. And then at Blytheville, it was just to go from 0-10, and we started 3-0 that year. And those kids, like, having the complete reversal of fortune, that I remember the look on some of their faces after that third game, and they were just kind of like, wow, we really can play. It's not a fluke. Like, it wasn't just, hey, we beat kind of a bad team week 1 and a decent team week 2. We beat a good team week 3. Like, we can do this. You know, we can do this. And so the challenges with some of those programs are just growing pains. So, like, for Blytheville, it was a growing – like, consistency is going to be a problem, you know. At Germantown, it was once we figured out the recipe, maintaining that consistency every day. And then at Haywood, it's just been, can you keep the standard where it has been for like the last 6 years? I mean, it's been a semifinal or bust for, I know, like the last 4. And so that's where the expectation, is going to be.
As a coach of Blytheville, Germantown, do you still keep up with those programs on a yearly or week-to-week basis? Or
I don't really keep up with the programs, but I do keep up with the kids that we've coached. You know, once we're kind of have gone, we passively kind of watch those kids because you do pull for them.
Right.
Life happens, decisions are made. It's not personal. It's just a business decision. You know, when people offer you more money or less classes, or, you know, it's hard to turn some of that stuff down from a work-life balance. So when you get that figured out, you know, it's you forge these kind of relationships with these kids. So you are passively interested. And we do work behind the scenes to try to get those kids into colleges. So, like, kids that when we left Germantown, we're at Haywood, there's still guys that would text and say, hey, can you help me with this? Like, can you help me with that? Yeah, absolutely. But the programs themselves, I mean, you pull for those places. You want them to continue. You know, you want them to keep happen. So, and that's for a part of that place. Like, my name will always be attached to it. Coach Smith's name, like, as a group, we're always going to be a part of that place.
Right.
So you want it to do well because you don't want it to be a thing that you're like, well, this was just a blip on the radar. You want to create something meaningful, you know?
Right.
How has your preparation this year been different in years past with the COVID and everything like that?
It's been probably the hardest year to get ready for, and every week you hold your breath. We had 5 games canceled this year. 4 of them were region games. And every week we found out on like a Wednesday or a Thursday. So you've done all this prep work. Your kids are geeked up. You got the jerseys out to wear to school. And then you got to say, hey, you got to bring them back because we're not playing this week. You know, and it's hard for Haywood, just to be candid, it's hard for us to find games.
Absolutely.
You know, we reached out to people in the city. We reached out to people all over. And there were very few, like, takers of of that. And the ones that did, like the Covingtons of the world, like Coach Kirby does a great job. Those kids are really tough. And even though they're a 3A school, they could play with just about anybody when they're full go. And so we're sitting here like, well, we play a week, we're off for 2 weeks. We play a week, we're off for 2 weeks. And like right now, we won't have played in 3 weeks by the time we play our first playoff game, which will be the 13th. As far as weightlifting and stuff goes, we have to think more about COVID restrictions and spacing and groups, and can we do this that we normally do? So how do we substitute? Game day preparation, travel, like it takes more. We got to have more buses. We got to have more space. We got to have all this kind of stuff. So it's been by far the hardest year, but where I think football coaches have a unique ability to thrive in these environments is that this is what every Friday is. The team comes out in something you didn't see. Okay, now you've got to adjust. A team is running some kind of personnel package you've never seen. Well, can I match that? Oh, there's an injury. Oh, there's this. Oh, there's that. Football coaches are built for the COVID world if they focus in and remember that it's just a game like anything else. And as long as you play within the rules and you do everything you're supposed to do, if you're focused enough and disciplined enough, it works itself out. But it has been by far the most challenging year of the 7 years I've been coaching, for sure. And Coach Smith would reiterate that same point, maybe even more emphatically than myself.
I asked this question to Coach LaCastro and Chris as well, just a few minutes ago on the other show. If you could give one piece of advice, piece of 2020 vision, I guess, to an up and coming young coach, what would it be and why?
Be the coach that you would want for yourself. Be the guy that you would trust with your life to do everything you're asked to do. Football is a game of process, and I hate it. I know everybody hates that word, but you're forged as a coach over time. There's very few people who just have the natural ability to walk out onto a field, walk into a locker room, and start winning games immediately. And I think what happens is, and we're all guilty of it as coaches, we all look around and we see things and opportunity, and people call, and people want to jump and people want to move, and they don't want to have that bond. And that's with Chris and myself, is that knowing him for as long as I have and working with him for as long as I have, I've been able to cultivate a skill set over time. And when you do that, when you're a younger coach, if you're patient and you focus and you really learn and you listen and you do everything that's asked of you and more, then what happens is the kind of path you begin to take as you climb, you start to remember those things yourself. And so that grace that you show to other people as they are developing, you're going to be more patient. If you're someone who is just trying to jump around all the time and you don't ever really build a cohesive bond with a group of people, then when those people go on and have success, there's a bitterness that kind of comes in. So you've got to be able to channel all of that, and to make sure that when people are ready to go and they come to you and say, like my defensive back coach from Germantown went with us to Haywood, and then he left to get a defensive coordinator job. But he had been with us long enough to where when he comes in and he says, hey, look, I think I'm going to make this jump, you're happy for him because he's been through those fires and he's forged. And when he does that, his level of success is more likely to be, higher than just, hey, what's the next opportunity? Let me jump out. Let me climb. Let me do this. If you do that as a young coach, you run the risk of, one, burnout, and two, just extreme disappointment. You're going to need some protection at some point. So when you're coming up, you better be protected with people who you trust and who you can work with every day. And people don't take that seriously. Like, you spend so many hours, like 90 work hours a week during the season with these people. And if you cannot be this person with that group of people, you're going to be miserable. Yeah. You're just going to be miserable.
Yeah. Logan, the last question I got for you, because you got some take care of some stuff. Did you play college football? I forgot.
I did not, actually. Now, I was recruited to play. In fact, I was Blyville's first 1,000-yard receiver they ever had, in the school history. And I got recruited to play FCS ball and just wound up not doing it because I was like, I'm not going to play in the NFL. I don't I had a bunch of academic money at the time. And so I was like, hey, I'm going to go do something else. And I did. So teaching and coaching is my second career.
All right. So growing up, who was your inspiration on the college ranks and then the NFL ranks now?
Let's see. When I was a kid growing up, I was a huge Peyton Manning fan. I had like a Peyton Manning section in my room. Like I had an autographed picture. Like that was my mom was a big Tennessee fan, you know, growing up.
The neck on the picture was probably about that long.
It was, yeah. It was like a giraffe. But but it was you know, it was cool. And so you grow up in the backyard, you know, throwing football to yourself or with your dad, and you know, you're running routes. And so in my mind, it was always, well, if this is what I'm going to be playing, receiver, then I can imagine that. So growing up, I had that kind of, hey, I'm catching balls. And sure enough, luckily, the guy we had at quarterback when I was in high school was about 6'4", about 220, and could sling it. And they let us throw it around a lot. And Coach Smith and I had a lot of success with that. And so it kind of was like living out, you know, that dream. As far as NFL, man, I'll be honest with you, I'm not a huge NFL fan, not because of anything other than the fact that I think it's a little boring at times. I think the college game is just much more exciting. You know, I think those athletes are incredible athletes, you know.
Agreed.
But I find myself just kind of like, okay, can we get to the fourth quarter where maybe there's a little more drama than not? So I've never really paid much attention. But Patrick Willis, once I really got into coaching and rewatching old game tapes and seeing what kind of linebacker he was, especially in college, and then it carried over to the NFL. Patrick Willis was a guy that I was like, man. And I remember being in school at Ole Miss when he was there, and just the club, like him being out there with a broken hand, like he just exuded toughness from a kid who nobody even knew about in like the backwoods of some small little town. And he becomes kind of this big, you know, player in NFL history. So he would probably be the closest one I would have had, you know, to growing up being like, oh, you know, that's a guy.
Any college coaches or NFL coaches that you look up to?
You know, I have moments where I think that PJ Fleck is, and people hate me for saying this, but I think he is a Zen master of culture. I think he knows how to get people moving in the right direction. And if he, you know, when you hear him speak, and I've heard him a couple of times at like coaching conventions and stuff, and like you would get up and run through a wall. Like you feel his energy becomes your energy. And I think that's the mark, you know, of a great coach. But just schematically, you know, I'm torn between Aranda and Venables. I've studied them both. I've met Aranda a couple times and talked with him and sat down and talked ball. And so like, he's like a professor. You know, I think he's like a mad scientist, and I don't know that you're going to get much more in depth and much more schematic than him. And I think Flores does a good job in the NFL on defense. You know, we'll see. Time is going to tell how that all plays out for him, but I think defensively, he's a good defensive mind.
Let me ask you this: as far as you were talking about coaching, Dave Aranda, is there a certain coach that you would say you kind of cater yourselves towards, or, you know, think like, or do you kind of think a lot of different guys?
I feel like if I could take the fire of Venables, because I have to have a guy grab me every time I'm calling a play out there, so I have my own like get back guy, because I'm probably the most
awesome. That is awesome.
Smith will tell you I'm probably the most penalized coach for sideline warnings in the state of Tennessee. Like, it's probably not even close. So
do we call you the Bobby Knight of college basketball?
I was getting ready to say. I was just getting ready to say that. There was like a streak. It got so bad at Germantown. He would come over to me and he'd go, "That's like the seventh game," you know. And it was either a warning or the actual. There had already been a warning, and then I was the one that was the result of the penalty.
So that was you.
Yeah. So they would always be like, "It's the bearded coach." They say it's the bearded guy, and so I just always would joke with Coach Smith. I'm like, well, you have a beard too, so don't just blame me. Yeah, it was me. So if I could take that fire, that kind of deal, but mix it with the cerebral part of Aranda, that would be kind of where I see myself. And don't get me wrong. I think Venables and Aranda are unique because they do things and force people to do things that they're not really used to dealing with, especially with pressure.
Yeah.
And for us, I've never been anywhere on defense until really Haywood, maybe this year, where we've had guys that could just line up and play base defense. I mean, we averaged like 9 points a game in 2018 on defense. It's all we gave up, but our biggest guy was only 230 pounds.
Wow.
I mean, our nose guard was 6 foot, 5'11", 165 pounds, and had 100 tackles from the nose position. And
Wow.
if you asked any coach, they would always ask us, has that kid graduated yet? I mean, we just felt like, and I just feel like for at least the high school level, that pressure is where you find your value, where you're going to find your money, unless you're just physically better than someone, you know.
Right.
And you can have all the technique in the world, but if somebody's 6'4", 300 and they lean on you and you're 6'1", 225, 230, you're not going to win many of those battles. So you have to do things to mix things up. And I also tell people too, I'm probably the worst coach in the world, but what I can do is trick a 15 to 18-year-old. I know that coaches know what they're seeing on tape. I mean, there's wonderful coaches everywhere. But is that 15 to 18-year-old, I can mess with him. And if I can mess with him, you can't go out there and throw it for him or run it for him. And so that's kind of the same way that I feel like Venables and Aranda, that kind of school of how can we maximize pressure to trick the people on the field, not necessarily the minds that are calling the plays out there to the kids. You know, that's kind of my philosophy is I'm not a very good coach, but I'll trick the heck out of some 15 to 18-year-olds.
All right, I'm sorry. This is the last question I really have for you.
No, you're good, man.
Okay. Is there any certain players that you enjoyed coaching against? Like, for example, I remember the Germantown Arlington days as well. So I'm going to bring you a flashback a little bit of Kenneth Walker and Tate Cole,
so
quarterback.
let me tell you the craziest story about Kenneth Walker, and I'm so happy for that kid. Like watching him on Saturdays and what he's doing right now at Wake Forest. So Kenneth Walker, like I guess it was 18. I guess he like jacks up his ankle and he's out for like 6 weeks. Doesn't play a game for like 6 weeks. And we've been kind of rope-a-doping teams, and it's, you know, we're picked to win that game. Well, Kenneth comes out in like street clothes before the playoff game.
Right.
Okay. He's like walking around, and I'm like, man, that is a specimen. Like, okay, so I think he's not playing. He's in straight street clothes. The whole warm-up, everything. We come out. He's in full gear on one ankle and still somehow manages to outrun everybody on the first play of the game. They line up in this like old Maryland eye, dead T wishbone thing. Turn around time. Outruns everybody on one ankle. The next time we kick we go down score, we kick off to him. The same kid, you guys there, I may have lost you. Oh, there you are.
Yeah,
right, so the same kid that I was telling you about, Kevion Ware. All right, it's the same kid I was telling about, Kevion, little 5'7" guy, kickoff, boom, he's like a Scud missile. He's taking off. He goes to hit Kenneth because, like I said, he was reckless. He did not care. Kenneth leapfrogs over him like full-scale hurdle, hits the ground, and keeps running. And then luckily that was the last of Kenneth Walker, because after that I think we pretty much shut it down for the rest of the night. The kid I told colleges about that nobody believed me about was Lincoln Perry. Nobody.
Yeah.
I told people, I said, take a chance on him. He's by far only Eric Gray in the city is probably better than this kid coming out of Memphis.
Yeah.
Nobody believed me, and there, you know, he's out there doing his thing at Arkansas State. So like, I'm happy for him. He gave me more nightmares because you could hit him over and over and over again, and it would be 1 yard, 2 yards, -1, 2 yards. And then all of a sudden it's like 88 and he broke like 6 tackles and ran right through them. And you're like, how did, I don't understand. You know, I don't get it. So for him to be Mr. Football, I mean, he single-handedly, I think, really put that Houston team on his back and carried it, you know, as far as he could, as far as he really could. And, you know, he was a kid that, you know, and then Dylan Mitchell, you know, we played Dylan Mitchell, and I've never seen a talent like that to be that big and that fast and that strong and could just do whatever he wanted to on a football field. You know, those guys. I mean, Eric Gray, you know, obviously you don't have to talk much about him. People know his whole deal, but those were some of the guys where I was like, you know, this is not normal. This is not normal high school football.
Yeah, he's not the leader right now in Shelby County, I believe, with the most touchdowns since he broke somebody's record of like years ago, you know.
Yeah.
But the reason I'm bringing up your former German, like the former player that you used to coach against, you know, a lot of people did not give Tate Kolwick enough credit as well at Arlington as their quarterback. You know, he basically threw over maybe 8,000 yards maybe in his high school career. And then you got Jeremy Banks. Yeah, then you got Jeremy Banks, who did pretty well at Cordova as well. And then Jacoby Hewitt, who's now playing at Indiana.
I think the biggest thing with Tolwick, well, I'm biased because when we played Tolwick, we kind of shut him down that last game he played in the regular season. And so as a talent, he had all the talent in the world. I think Tate's deal was people don't look at him like that because he transitioned over to baseball, you know, and baseball was a big deal for him. That was kind of what we ran into with Ethan, you know, at German